Okay, let's draw another horizon line. Let's place our vanishing point. And now let's draw a chair. Before we do, let's think about what the design of the chair needs to be. It always helps to do a little sketch. Our chair is going to look roughly like this. It's going to have a tilted back. It's going to have a flat seat. And it's going to have four legs, as chairs tend to have. Alright, let's outline our chair in black so you can actually see the design here. Okay, and then to make things interesting, we're going to draw three little divisions inside the chair, like this, for a little bit of ventilation. Let's think about what components make up our chair. Well, we've got four legs that are long cuboid shapes. That look like this. We have a flat box for the seat, like that. And then we have the back of the chair, which is another flat box that's tilted back a little bit. And then we have our carved shapes that look like that. So we're going to use the additive method of building blocks for most of the chair, and then we're going to use the subtractive method to carve into the seat, the back of the chair. As long as we break things down to simple steps like that, our process is going to be manageable. So we're going to keep things very organized and systematic. We're going to start our drawing, but the first thing we need to do is to determine the floor plan of our chair. Notice that our chair sits within a square tile. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to build a square tile. Step one. Square tile. I'm going to start off the drawing with my red pen. Anything done in red is a construction line. This is a line that I'm going to ultimately erase. Let's make this square tile about 3 inches across. Let's do that. Let's send lines going back in space, like this. How do we know how far back the tile recedes? Well, we're going to use our measuring point. Line up our ruler with our measuring point and mark off the spot. Now, let's take a look. This is where our tile ends. All right. Check. We've drawn the square tile. Step 2. Notice that the dimensions of the chair legs at the bottom are perfectly square. So the next step is to draw our 4 little squares. So we're going to draw 4 little squares at each corner of our large tile. I'm going to make my squares 1/2 inch. So we know what the widths are back here. Here's the width of the front leg. Here's the width of the back leg. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Here's the front leg. Here's the back leg. Okay, how do we know what the square tiles look like? Well, we're going to use our measuring point to determine how far they recede. Here, and also here. And now we know that if the intersection on this tile is here, it's going to be the same on this side. And if we know what our intersection is here, this got smeared a little bit, it'll give us the intersection on the other side. Alright, so we built our 4 little squares. Now we're going to build our, oh, should mark that off, build our towers. Build. We're going to build the height of our legs. Let's start off with the one on the right. You want to make sure that these lines are perfectly vertical. That's very, very, very important. Use your right angle, but this clear ruler does an excellent job. Right, I can see the lines line up. Alright, so how tall should the legs be? Well, notice that the dimensions of our chair are mostly square. So whatever I have width-wise, I'm going to have height-wise. So we can measure out 3 inches. I'm just going to eyeball it for right now. Let's get the height of our vertical line here. Let's make sure it's actually vertical. Everybody, this type of drawing requires a lot of precision, but ultimately it's a precision that's no more precise than when you're doing observational drawing. Alright, let's see. I find drawing from observation actually more challenging. Right? Figure drawing, for instance, placing the eyes in the right spot, that's harder than doing any of this. Okay. Now we're going to build boxes by drawing lines that go back in space. How far back they extend, we don't know yet. We're going to figure it out. Okay, now let's construct the back 2 corners of each one of our blocks. Here's the back corner. Oh, let's actually draw a line here. Okay, let's do the same thing here. And hopefully, if I'm precise, the corners of each one of my boxes are going to line up. Let's try it. Let's see. And it looks like I'm pretty close. If they don't, then you have to go through and figure out exactly where you went off. Quite often I find students drawing the tile incorrectly. They didn't quite line up the lines to the VP, they start drawing the chair, and they can't figure out what's wrong. Well, it's the very first step, the square tile, which is pretty tragic. Okay, let's construct our back legs. So notice here we have a little bit of overlap between the back leg and the front leg. That can happen. I tried to avoid it by drawing my chair off to the side of the vanishing point. If it was any closer, then the two legs would overlap entirely. But look, overlapping is not always avoidable. We don't always have the option to place the chair wherever we want. Let's say I'm drawing an entire room and we have a chair, a couch, a TV. Some object is going to be underneath the vanishing point. We just have to be really systematic, really clear, and not get lost. Alright, so what is the height of the leg here? Well, it's the intersection here. Now let's draw the other leg going up. And what's the height of the legs? Well, we have it here. Let's make sure it goes all the way up here. Okay, so here is the height of one leg, here is the height of the other leg. It's a little bit confusing because these two legs are touching each other, but you can see, here's one leg, here's the front of the other leg. Let's draw the back two corners on both of them. Okay. Again, everybody, we're just constructing boxes. Nothing complicated about this at all. It's just the construction lines are building up a little bit. But we're pretty close to drawing our 4 towers. We're getting there. Okay, and again, if my lines are correct, I should have 4 towers. Here's the back 2 towers. Okay, so now we've got our 4 towers. Now let's build our seat. That's going to be step 4. Nothing complicated about that. Our seat is a square that runs from each corner of the legs. So let's build a square tile that sits on top of our 4 towers. Here's the front edge. Here's the back corner. Here's the back edge. And we already have the front corner. Okay. Now the next step, before I start constructing any more, you can see there's a huge buildup of construction lines. At this stage, I recommend reinforcing the visible lines and erasing out any construction, all the lines that are left that are in red. You'll find that as you're drawing, construction starts building up. Those measuring lines start building up, and they can get really confusing after a while. They'll start throwing you off. So at certain steps in the process, I recommend reinforcing the drawing and turning your objects back to opaque. Now, sometimes it's hard to estimate exactly which lines you're going to need later. Sometimes you erase something and you realize, wait a minute, I needed that construction line to build on somewhere else. Over time, you start learning how to anticipate which lines you're going to need. But because you guys are using graphite, usually there's a little shadow left over from the construction. You'll be able to get the construction back if you need it. Okay, so you can see that part of the legs are being obscured by the seat. Let's put that in. Okay, now that the object is a little more solid looking, we can proceed to putting the seat on. And I'm only going to reinforce the front two edges. The back edges I'm going to leave in red because I'm going to have to erase them later. This is where a little bit of anticipation really helps. Okay, now let's give the seat a little bit of thickness. I forgot to write down build seat. Now notice that our seat is about the same thickness as the width of a chair leg. It's about 1/2 inch. Let's mark off 1/2 inch. Should probably work in red. This needs to be a construction line. Okay, so here's the top corner. Now we're going to extend lines back. You can see how reinforcing our lines helps us from getting lost. Now getting lost can still happen. Alright, so where does this end? At the corner here. Here. The seat ends at the corner here, right? At each one of the 4 corners of our towers. Now let's connect our dots a little bit, and hopefully, if I'm accurate, hopefully, those 2 lines will connect. There's our seat. Let's reinforce our visible lines a little bit. Let's do that. Alright, so now we've got a stool. Now let's build the back. Build the back of the chair. Notice that the thickness of the back of the chair is about the same thickness as the width of the leg. Let's use red. So we're going to mark off 1/2 inch. And let's start giving our chair a little bit of tilt. And then, this is important, make the height of the back of the chair exactly 3.5 inches. 1, 2, 3.5. I'll explain why in a second. Alright. Let's get the same tilt back here. Make sure it's actually the same. You want to make sure that the top of the chair, the top of the seat here, is perpendicular to the tilt that we've created. Now let's extend lines going back in space. Extend lines going back in space here. So now we know that the seat ends here and here. Let's tilt the same way as the front of the back. Here. And here. Let's line up this corner with this corner so that we can figure out where the back corner of the seat is. Here. And hopefully that's going to line up. Okay, pretty close. Okay, so now the last step is to build the holes. So carve, in this case, the subtractive process. Carve the holes. Let's think about what those holes actually look like. Here is the seat if we're looking at it straight on. It has 3 grooves or holes in it that look like this. Notice that the holes are approximately the same width as the solid parts. So this is wood, this is a hole, wood, a hole, wood, a hole. So if we create a grid that looks like this, that's going to help me build those 3 shapes. What kind of grid? Well, let's count the bars. 7. Okay, so how do we construct a 7-barred grid like this? Well, if you remember, when we were drawing the window, and we needed a 9-pane window, we found 3 even increments going this way, and then we ran a diagonal from corner to corner to find our vertical separations. So this is 3 by 3. This also works 5 by 5. It also works 7 by 7. So to construct this, we need to construct a 7 by 7 grid. Like this. Let's do that. We're going to take the height of the seat and mark off 1/2 inch increments. 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, which is going to give me 7 even increments going along the height of the chair. Now let's draw lines from each one of those increments, going this way, going this way. Now that we've got our 7 increments, let's run a diagonal from corner to corner and make little points at each one of the intersections. This is important because we've got the back corner here. We don't want to get confused by it. Mark off the points. And now, hopefully, we're going to be able to construct our grid without confusion. Okay, so here is our next increment, right here. Trying to keep my lines parallel to each other, if I can. Alright, there's our 7 by 7 grid. And now I'm going to mark off where the holes need to be. So we're going to skip the first increment, go to the second one, start at the second square down, and draw a line. Okay, let's skip over to the middle bar. Let's skip over. Okay, so now we're going to mark off these spots here. And there's our chair. The last step, once again, now the way everything is constructed, we're going to reinforce all of our visible lines. Erase out the grid, we no longer need it. And there's our chair. Just for the sake of clarity, you can shade these little holes. So you know where they are. But our chair is done. Alright guys, I realize this is really complicated. I recommend watching this tutorial more than one time. Take detailed notes as you're watching. Most importantly, if you get confused at any point, make a note of at what time the confusion occurred, so that when we do the Q&A session, or you email me with your questions, you can tell me exactly where you got confused. Otherwise, your questions are going to be generic. I'm going to have a hard time answering them. There's our chair.